Welcome to Shatter.
Help me reach 5,000 subscribers. Support the video with a like and leave your thoughts in the comments. It happened on a Thursday night. Nothing special about it. Leftovers from Olive Garden on the counter, her glass of wine half empty, the sound of a Netflix show playing in the background. She sat across from me at the table, scrolled through her iPhone, and sighed like the world owed her something. Then she said it, casual, like she was commenting on the weather. "I'm not in the mood lately." For a moment, I didn't even react. I just looked at her, the woman who used to reach for me first, who once pulled me close just because she could. I waited, hoping maybe she'd soften it, maybe Ada will figure it out. But she didn't. She just kept scrolling. So I said it back, calm and steady. "Lately? Or just never with me?" That made her stop. The pause in her hand was small, but sharp. She blinked, then rolled her eyes like I was being dramatic. Said I was overthinking. That it wasn't about me. But it was. Every word, every tone, every deflection, all of it was about me. After that, she got up and disappeared into the bedroom. I sat there, staring at the dim reflection in my wine glass, and realized something I hadn't wanted to admit. I'd become background noise in my own marriage. That night, she went to bed early. I stayed up, sitting in the quiet hum of the fridge, thinking about how fast love turns into habit. I used to know the rhythm of her breathing when she slept. Now it just sounded like distance. The next morning, she acted normal, coffee brewing, her hair in a towel, music playing low on her phone. She kissed my cheek, said she had an early meeting. I didn't say much, just nodded, watching her walk out the door like nothing had shifted. But something had. That evening, when she came home, she barely looked at me. I asked if everything was okay. She said she was just tired, again. I didn't push. I just watched her pass by, watched how she avoided my touch without even realizing it. Later, lying next to her in the dark, I reached out once, slow, gentle, familiar. She turned slightly, said she was too tired. So I stopped reaching. And from that night on, the silence between us grew heavy. Not loud, not angry, just quiet enough to suffocate everything that used to feel alive. The nights started blending together after that. Same bed, same silence, same 2 feet of space that used to be warmth. She'd fall asleep scrolling on her phone, the glow from the screen hitting her face like a shield. I'd lie there, eyes open, staring at the ceiling and counting the seconds between her breaths. It's strange how someone can still be right next to you and feel miles away. At first, I tried to fix it. Small things. Flowers from Walmart. Her favorite coffee waiting in the kitchen. A hand on her back when I walked by. She'd smile politely, say thank you, and then retreat to her phone, her work, her thoughts. I realized she wasn't rejecting me out of anger. She was just elsewhere. One night, after dinner, I reached for her hand while we sat on the couch. She pulled it back casually, saying she wasn't in the mood for anything tonight. That word again, mood. It had become her weapon of choice. She didn't shout, didn't fight. She just erased me one refusal at a time. I stopped trying after that. Stopped asking, stopped touching, stopped hoping. I began to move differently around her. Quiet, deliberate, distant. She noticed, but she couldn't name it. One morning, she asked if I was mad. I told her no, because I wasn't. I was something colder, detached. A week later, she came home late, said she'd been out with coworkers. Her laughter sounded forced, too loud, like someone trying to prove they still had joy left. She hugged me quickly, but her body stayed stiff. I didn't ask who she was with. I didn't check her phone. I just watched. The next morning, I made my own coffee and left early. I drove my Ford F-150 to the edge of town, parked by the water, and sat there watching the sunrise. I didn't feel pain anymore. Just an odd sense of clarity. The kind that comes when you stop fighting for something that's already gone. That night, I came home late. She asked where I'd been. I said I just needed air. She didn't push. Maybe she thought I was bluffing, like before. But deep down, she must have felt it, the shift. The man who once reached for her was learning to live without her touch. And that's when she started to lose control. It didn't happen all at once. Detachment grows slow, like frost spreading across glass. You don't see it at first. You just notice the reflection getting harder to recognize. I started spending less time at home, more time out. The gym after work. A late coffee at Starbucks. Long drives with no destination. I told her I was busy, and she didn't question it. Maybe she thought I was bluffing, waiting for her to notice. But I wasn't. I was practicing absence. She began to sense it. The quiet bothered her now. She'd walk into a room, see me sitting there reading, and linger, like she wanted to say something but couldn't find the right tone. Sometimes she'd sit beside me, scrolling on her phone, pretending we were still connected by proximity. But even that illusion was fading. One evening, she mentioned that I'd changed. Her voice was soft, uncertain. I said people do, when they're done being ignored. She looked at me, trying to read my face, but I didn't give her anything to work with. I'd learned that silence unsettles her more than anger ever could. A few nights later, she came home dressed up, hair done, perfume lingering in the air. Said she'd been out with friends. I just nodded. That calm reaction threw her off completely. She kept talking, trying to fill the silence, but my detachment was louder than her excuses. For the first time, I saw panic flicker behind her eyes. The next morning, she made breakfast for the first time in weeks. Pancakes, fruit, coffee, the same things I used to make for her. She acted casual, but her eyes followed me, searching for a crack in my composure. I thanked her, ate quietly, and left early. She stood at the sink after I walked out, staring at her reflection in the window. I could feel it. She was starting to see herself the way I'd been seeing her all along. At work, I didn't check my phone once. No texts from her, no missed calls. That silence used to sting. Now it felt peaceful. I realized I wasn't just pulling away from her. I was remembering who I was before I started needing her validation to breathe. And by the time I came home that night, something irreversible had shifted. She tried to reach for me again, but this time, I didn't flinch. Because you can't crave a touch you once taught yourself to stop feeling. She started acting different after that. Not affectionate, just cautious. Like she was walking on ice that might crack if she said the wrong thing. The irony was almost painful. The woman who once had all the power, who decided when love happened and when it didn't, was now studying every silence, every small movement, like it held the answer to how she lost control. One night, I came home later than usual. She was sitting on the couch, TV on, but the sound muted. Her eyes were red. She asked if I was avoiding her. I said no, I was just busy. She said it felt like I didn't care anymore. I told her I wasn't sure if I was supposed to. That sentence hit her harder than I expected. She didn't respond, just nodded, like someone who'd just been told a truth they'd been avoiding. She went to bed early again, but I didn't follow. I stayed up, scrolling through nothing, letting the distance stretch until it became natural. The next morning, she tried something different. A soft touch on my arm as I got ready for work. The kind of touch that used to melt me instantly. But it didn't this time. I didn't pull away, but I didn't respond either. I think that silence told her everything she needed to know. I wasn't angry anymore. I was indifferent. At lunch, I met up with Marcus. He asked if things were better. I told him better isn't always the same as fixed. He laughed, said I sounded colder than usual. I told him peace sometimes looks like distance. When I got home that evening, she was cooking dinner. I hadn't seen her do that in months. She tried to talk, asking about my day, smiling too hard. I could tell it wasn't love, it was fear. Fear that she was losing something she thought would always be there. After dinner, I went upstairs to shower. When I came out, she was sitting on the edge of the bed, wearing one of my old shirts, like she used to. She looked up at me, almost pleading, and said she missed me. I just said, I've been here the whole time. And that broke her. Because for the first time, she realized I wasn't the one who'd disappeared. She was. And now, I was finally learning how to live in the emptiness she left behind. After that night, everything changed, just not in the way she expected. She started reaching for me more often. A hand on my arm when she passed by, sitting closer on the couch, finding excuses to be in the same room. But the connection she was trying to rebuild wasn't there anymore. It wasn't rejection on my part, it was absence. Once something breaks quietly, you don't always hear it when it finally stops existing. She tried to talk about it one evening, said she didn't understand what happened to us, that it felt like she was living with a stranger. I told her maybe she was finally meeting the man who stopped begging for her affection. She went silent. That silence stretched longer than any fight we'd ever had. The next few days, she became unpredictable. One moment kind, the next defensive. She started dressing differently, maybe hoping to draw my eyes again. I noticed, of course, but I didn't react. The version of me who used to chase her approval was gone. What stood in his place was calm, cold clarity. I started leaving early for work, grabbing my coffee from Starbucks instead of drinking at home. I liked those extra minutes of quiet. She'd text me during the day, short messages about nothing. I'd answer hours later, polite, distant. That delay, that lack of urgency, ate at her more than any cruel word could. One Friday night, she made dinner again. Candles, wine, everything she used to love. When I came home, she smiled like it was our anniversary. Said she wanted to make things right. I sat down, thanked her, ate quietly. She kept waiting for warmth, for a spark. But it never came. After dinner, she asked if I'd ever touch her again the way I used to. I told her gently that intimacy doesn't live where respect has died. She started crying, softly at first, then louder. Said she'd made a mistake, that she'd taken me for granted. I listened, but my face didn't move. I didn't hate her. I just couldn't feel the same anymore. When I finally stood up, she reached for my hand. I let her touch me, but I didn't return it. That small, empty contact said everything. She had built a wall to protect herself from needing me. Now she was trapped behind it, starving for the same closeness she'd once refused. The distance between us wasn't just emotional anymore. It had shape, weight, gravity. I could feel it when she moved through the room. Every step she took toward me felt cautious, uncertain, like approaching something she didn't know how to touch anymore. And maybe she didn't. I'd stopped trying to make her comfortable. I no longer adjusted my tone or my schedule around her moods. I came and went when I wanted. Sometimes I'd drive out of town after work, grab dinner alone at Waffle House, sit at the counter with a coffee, and just breathe. That kind of peace, quiet, unearned, and steady, became my new addiction. When I got home those nights, she'd still be awake, waiting in the living room. She didn't yell or question. She just looked at me with that quiet panic that comes when someone realizes the person they once ignored now holds all the silence in the world. I'd nod, say goodnight, and walk past her. She started overcompensating again. New perfume, new clothes, a forced cheerfulness that didn't fit her anymore. She laughed too loudly, asked too many questions, touched me like she was testing whether the connection was still alive. But I could feel the performance in every movement. She was trying to summon something that no longer lived in her hands. One night, she finally asked if there was someone else. Her voice shook when she said it. I told her there wasn't. She didn't believe me, but not because she thought I was lying. She just couldn't understand how someone could stop wanting her so completely. That's when the tears came, the kind she didn't try to hide. I watched them fall, calm, detached, because the truth was, I didn't want revenge. I wanted peace. And peace doesn't shout. It withdraws. The next morning, she didn't speak to me. Not out of anger, but shame. I left for work without saying goodbye. She stood by the window, watching, her reflection small against the glass. It hit me then. She wasn't losing me. She'd already lost me long ago, somewhere between her excuses and my patience. That night, when I came home, she was asleep on my side of the bed, reaching, maybe even dreaming, of the man who used to crave her touch. But that man was gone, and all that remained beside her was the echo of what she'd refused to feel. By then she had stopped pretending everything was fine. The brightness was gone from her face. The easy confidence she wore like armor had cracked. Every movement felt deliberate, rehearsed, as if she were trying to remind me who she used to be. It was too late for reminders. The version of her I'd loved no longer existed. I started waking up earlier than usual, just to leave before she did. I'd sit in my car, coffee from Starbucks in hand, watching the sky lighten over the quiet streets. Those mornings used to be ours, shared routines, half-awake laughter, her head on my shoulder. Now they belonged only to me, and somehow, that felt right. When I got home at night, she would be waiting, usually at the kitchen table. She didn't try to talk anymore. She'd just watch me walk in, her eyes heavy with something between regret and disbelief. I could feel her searching for the smallest spark of what used to be there, but there was nothing left to find. One night, I sat down across from her. She asked if I hated her. I told her no. Hate requires energy, and I was done giving her any. I said I didn't wish her pain, just clarity. That's all silence ever was, clarity without mercy. She nodded, wiped a tear, and whispered that she finally understood how it felt to be unwanted. That sentence lingered in the air long after she left the room. For years, she'd made me feel invisible, and now she was standing in that same darkness. But I didn't take pleasure in it. I'd simply stopped bleeding for what wouldn't heal. Later that night, I heard her in the bedroom, quietly crying into a pillow. I lay on the couch, staring at the ceiling, realizing that this was the moment she'd finally met herself. The woman who mistook withdrawal for strength, who thought control was love. When morning came, she didn't speak. She made breakfast, left a plate for me, and went to work without looking back. The house was silent again, but this time it wasn't heavy. It was clean. I sat there, drinking my coffee, and it hit me. The space she once created to keep me out had become her own prison, and I wasn't locked inside it anymore. After that morning, I realized something. She had finally started living in the silence she built for me. Every sound she made, every door closed softly, every cup placed carefully on the counter, was a quiet apology she didn't know how to say out loud. The woman who once dismissed me with a shrug now lingered in the background, watching me with the kind of longing that comes too late. She tried to reach me through routine, cooking again, folding my shirts the way I liked, leaving the scent of her perfume in the hallway like a breadcrumb trail back to her. But I'd stopped following trails. I wasn't angry. I wasn't even numb. I was simply free. One evening, I came home to find her sitting on the porch, legs pulled up, wearing my old hoodie. The same one she used to complain about because it was too worn out. She looked small in it now. She said she'd been thinking a lot, that she missed when things were simple, when we laughed over nothing. I told her those moments died when she started rationing affection like it was a privilege instead of a gift. Her eyes dropped to the floor. She said she didn't know why she did it. I told her she never thought I'd stop waiting. We sat there for a while, not speaking. The quiet between us wasn't sharp anymore. It was just final. She asked if I ever thought about leaving. I told her I already had. I just hadn't packed yet. That wasn't cruelty. It was truth. That night, she came to bed later than usual. I could feel her hesitation when she lay down, the way her body faced me but stopped just short of touching. For years, I used to reach over and close that gap. Now, I let it exist. That space had become the border between who we were and who we'd become. She whispered into the dark that she missed my touch. I didn't answer, because love, once it freezes, doesn't thaw from words. It takes time, loss, and silence. And as she drifted off to sleep beside me, I knew she was finally beginning to crave the very thing she'd denied for so long, closeness. But craving and deserving are two different things. And for the first time, I was the one who got to decide which she'd get. The next morning, something in her broke quietly. I could see it in the way she moved around the kitchen, slower, softer, careful not to disturb the silence she used to own. The air between us had changed. It wasn't heavy anymore. It was hollow, like a house after everyone's moved out. She tried to start a conversation over breakfast, talking about anything but us. The weather, work, plans for the weekend. I answered politely, like a guest passing through. That calmness unsettled her more than any fight ever did. She wanted chaos, something to prove there was still life between us. But I had already learned the power of restraint. That evening, she came into the living room holding a photo. The two of us from years ago, smiling at a barbecue. She said she missed those people. I told her they don't exist anymore. She asked if I thought we could ever get them back. I said you can't rebuild something you never protected. The words landed like a slow fall. She didn't cry this time. She just stared at the picture until her hands began to tremble. I went upstairs without another word. It wasn't cruelty. It was acceptance. The kind that doesn't need closure. Later that night, I heard her in the bedroom, pacing. When I walked in, she stopped. Her face was streaked with tears, her voice quiet but raw. She said she couldn't stand how cold I'd become, that she'd rather I yelled, hated, anything but this distance. I told her hate still means someone matters. She didn't anymore, not in the way she used to. She broke down completely then, not out of anger, but surrender. I left her there and went to sleep on the couch. It was peaceful, the kind of peace that comes when there's nothing left to prove. Around midnight, I woke to find her standing in the doorway, watching me. Her face was pale, her eyes red, but her voice steady. She whispered that she finally understood what it felt like to want someone who no longer wanted you back. I said nothing. She stood there a while longer before turning away. The sound of her footsteps fading down the hall was softer than any apology. And as I lay there staring into the dark, I realized she'd become a stranger in her own life, craving the very warmth she'd spent years pushing away. The house stayed quiet after that night. Not the tense kind of quiet. This one felt final, like the echo after a slammed door. I woke up early, made coffee, and sat by the window watching the sun spill over the driveway. She hadn't come downstairs yet. The silence felt clean. It wasn't sadness anymore. It was freedom. When she finally appeared, her face looked different. Softer somehow, stripped of that defiant pride she used to wear. She said she couldn't sleep, that her chest hurt every time she looked at me. I told her pain is the tax we pay for realizing too late what we had. She nodded, her eyes glassy but calm. She wasn't arguing anymore. She was accepting the loss. She asked if I'd ever forgive her. I told her I already had. Forgiveness was never the hard part. It was trust, and that doesn't come back just because someone finally regrets losing it. She said she understood, that she'd brought this on herself. Then she said the one thing I didn't expect. She wished I'd never stopped trying. That line hit me differently, because once, I'd lived by it. I'd spent years trying, talking, reaching, waiting, all while she built walls I couldn't climb. Now those same walls were her prison. I told her trying only matters when both people are reaching for the same thing. And for too long, I'd been reaching alone. We didn't talk much after that. We just sat there, two people surrounded by the ruins of what they once called love. When she finally stood up to leave, she paused, then placed her hand on my shoulder. It was the same hand that once pulled away from me 100 times. This time it stayed. Gentle, hesitant, real. I looked up at her and said quietly, "You wanted space. And now you have it. But you also have the truth." She blinked hard, tears spilling over, but there was no begging this time. Just silence, the kind that admits defeat without words. She turned, walked upstairs, and closed the door behind her. That night, I slept in our bed again. She lay next to me, still and silent, her hand inches away from mine. And as I stared into the dark, I realized the balance had finally shifted. She was the one who couldn't sleep, craving the touch she once blocked, and I was the man who'd learned to live without it. Support the channel by liking, commenting, and subscribing. I promise even more interesting stories.